Hello, Louisville. Guess who's coming to dinner? Happy Friday. Welcome to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I am your host, Janice Carter Miller. And we're getting ready to start. No, first, happy Founders Day, Soros. Whoop, whoop. Yes, Delta Sigma Theta, Founders Day. This weekend, we're going into our MLK weekend, our celebration Dr. Martin Luther King holiday and his birthday. That's why it's all this weekend. So that's where we're getting ready for this weekend. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of Founders Day events happening and getting ready for my show on Monday. It's going to be Girls' Night Out. I'm going to introduce you to the one and the only Miss Toni Morgan, who lives out in Las Vegas, Nevada. One of my girlfriends that I became very close with while I lived in Vegas. And she is a go-getter, a motivator, a risk taker, a mortgage broker, an entrepreneur extraordinaire. So don't miss Monday. That's going to be with Miss Toni Morgan out in Las Vegas, doing it. Girls' night out. This girlfriend is doing it. Okay. So tonight's show, I started to bring it to you sooner, but I went to a couple of weeks ago, the last press conference that Mayor Fischer had, but it was about the dedication for the historical marker for the Black Six. Remember, we had a disturbance in 1968 down on 28th and Greenwood. They call it a riot. I call it just a real misunderstanding of really what happened. And they have seemed to peel back the onion to find out what some of those reasons were. And actually, the crowd dispersed because there was a pop bottle thrown into the audience, and it sounded like the sound of a shot being fired. And everybody dispersed, and some people who took advantage, there was some destruction of property, but mostly it wasn't. It ravaged our neighborhood, and they never ever made any attempts to put it back together. Now, mind you, I said 1968, so we're talking about 50 years ago, 50 or more years ago. Okay. And that's why now there's a lot of investment being made into the West, where the majority of Blacks in Louisville live. So I thought I'd bring you that dedication, because if you didn't know what happened, and also something that happened with Mayor Greg Fischer, former Mayor Greg Fischer, is that he apologized to the Black Six. I've never heard anyone apologize to Black folks for anything, especially a government official in his official capacity as mayor of the city at that time. He apologized to the Black Six, which I thought was one of the milestones of his time in office, that he did that one gesture. You can do one small thing that makes a difference in people's lives. And it meant a lot, because not all of those Black Six are still living. We have Mr. Manfred Reed, and we have Mr. Sam Hawkins. We have Sherry Hamilton, who's the daughter of her mother, Ruth Bryant. Bryant was also one of the Black Six. I think she was the only lady. And Mr. Cosby was one of the Black Six. His name was Pete Cosby. And there's another gentleman's name. leaves me at this moment. But I just wanted you to hear a little bit about what the mayor said and what some of the Black Six who are still with us said. Um, and just take a listen. This is just something different. I thought you might enjoy being privy to if you were unable to make that dedication. So this is hello, Louisville. Guess who's coming? Hush. I just had the marker in the wrong place. So take a look. And we're going to go
Jefferson Square Park to mark the 2020 racial justice protest move us forward as a city and as a country. Moving us forward on a journey that will likely never be over, but one to paraphrase Dr. Martin Luther King, bends toward justice. Today's ceremony to honor the Black Six is being held not to wipe the slate clean, but to officially correct the record about 6 Black Louisvillians who were falsely charged with fomenting racial violence in our city in 1968 and slandered for years after when they were, in fact, only reacting to official misconduct and discrimination by the city powers to be at that time. A historical marker we will unveil in a few minutes this morning shares the story about the Black Six, and the marker reads, in May of 1968, a traffic stop of a Black school teacher, Charles Thomas, turned violent, leading to a Louisville police officer suspension, firing, then reinstatement. The reinstatement touched off days of civil unrest after a peaceful rally at 28th and Greenwood in the Parkland neighborhood. The National Guard was called in to restore peace. 6 Black Americans, who later became known as the Black Six, were scapegoated and falsely charged with conspiracy in connection with the unrest and faced additional accusations of planning to blow up oil refineries in the West End and destroy private property. Members of the Black Six were Ruth Bryant, James Cortez, Walter T. Pete Cosby, Samuel Hawkins, Manfred Reed, and Robert Kuyu Sims. Some of them barely knew each other, lost their livelihoods, and suffered irreparable harm to their reputations. The criminal conspiracy charges against them were dismissed in 1970 when Judge S. Rush Nicholson directed a verdict of acquittal, citing a lack of evidence, and threw the case out of Criminal Court 2, which was then located on Congress Alley. In 2022, Louisville Mayor Greg Fischer issued an apology on behalf of the city to members of the Black Six and their families for the harm inflicted upon them. This marker is dedicated to the Black Six, whose struggle taught us to never give up the battle for dignity and justice. Back in May, at a Fraser History Museum discussion about the Black Six, was an incredible discussion, a panel discussion, and I was just attending as an interested citizen. I asked whether they had ever received an apology for what happened to them at the hands of the city. And much to my dismay, no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing had ever been offered. I guess I should not have been surprised, because for too long, government and its institutions have harmed many of the people that they're supposed to protect and elevate, particularly Black Americans. Now, I was not mayor in 1968, but I have represented the institution of the city government of Louisville for these past 12 years. So that evening, during that discussion, and on behalf of the city, I apologize to the Black Six for the grievous wrongs of the government toward them. So that brings us to today. I want to thank Joy McAtee. Where's Joy? Joy leads our Lean Into Louisville effort, and she, along with Rachel Platt, were moderating that discussion. And after that discussion, we said we need to do something more formal about this, and Joy has been leading that effort inside of Metro government. So Joy, you're a good lady. Thank you so much. So before we go outside to unveil the Black Six marker, I want to share this platform of city government with the surviving members of the Black Six, some of their family members, other participants and representatives of those who were part of the story as it happened and since it happened. So first, let's welcome an incredible public servant, and that's the chairman emeritus of the Louisville Metro Housing Authority, who's become a dear friend over the years that I so admire. We call him the chairman. Please welcome Manfred Reed Sr.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank everybody for being here. I am so humble that we have an opportunity to be able to reminisce on the past, look to the future, and rebuild our infrastructure for social, economic, and political development. This mayor has been a great friend and supporter of not only the Black Six, but the community at large in trying to bring about transition, reconciliation, and hope. We regret the fact that he won't be here. We need him. We do look forward to a new administration who has committed itself to be able to advance the causes and to promote housing, economic development, and social reform. The victims of this tragedy look forward to reconciliation, reparation, and economic growth throughout the area, throughout the whole metro community. But the area of greatest need, where we have loss of value in terms of home ownership, loss of home ownership, loss of land and land use rights. So we got a challenge to meet the future, to rebuild, to hope, and to bring back the prosperity that we knew in the 1960s. I thank y'all very, very much, and I appreciate you for coming.
Ruth Bryant was a member of the Black Six, and what a legacy she produced through her presence in our city and through her daughter, a great public servant, former Louisville Metro Councilwoman Sherry Bryant Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Fischer. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
On behalf of my late mother, Ruth Booker Bryant, and my entire family and her friends, I want to thank Mayor Fischer for the bold actions he has undertaken this year by offering a public apology, not once, but twice, in fact, on behalf of city government to the Black Six, and calling the attention of the entire community to the injustice they endured and was inflicted upon them and their families 50 years ago by the powers that be, with the installation of the marker, which will be unveiled shortly. My mother majored in history in college and became a permanent substitute teacher in the Louisville Public Middle Schools, teaching social studies. So I know how much she would appreciate this marker, which will be an excellent opportunity, not just for young people, but for all of the community to ask questions and learn about what and how this happened. Because for most people today, it's a distant memory, or they weren't born or never heard about the Black Six and what happened in this community in 1968. But as the late Alderwoman Lois Morris, my mentor, used to say, but you gotta know the history. My mother was a member of the West End Community Council with her friend and neighbor, Ann Braden. And in 1963, she founded Women United for Social Action. In February of 1964, when my mother was just 40 years old, she was appointed by the Mayor, William O. Calder, to the Citizens Advisory Committee for Community Development. Her role as a community member was to be informed by the administration of federal dollars coming in, programs, activities that were going to take place in the community, and to inform the administration on the needs of the community for improvements in housing, education, planning, public facilities, zoning, urban renewal, church, and minority problems. It was to be a two-way street of communications. As a member of the West End Community Council, she worked closely with the mothers who lived in the Southwick public housing development, helping to address and bring to the attention of the advisory committee their needs and concerns. What she learned at the advisory committee, such as the war on poverty, dollars coming into the community, she took back to the council. And what she learned and observed of the needs of the community at the council, she took back to the advisory committee for a hopeful resolution. She had a seat at the table, and she was going to be heard. She took this role and responsibility on the advisory committee very seriously. She was very vocal and outspoken and unafraid to speak truth to power. She was often a thorn in the side of the administration. In 1967, 3 years later, she was one of only 2 women on the Committee of Open Housing, working with the Reverend A.D. King, Reverend W.J. Hodge, to develop strategies to get an open housing ordinance passed by the Board of Aldermen. In the open housing movement, she was closely involved with Sam Hawkins and Bob Kuyu Sims in coordinating the nightly demonstrations and marches on Mayor Smead's home and his furniture business, as well as the homes of the members of the Board of Aldermen, in order to dramatize the need for passage of an open housing ordinance with teeth. Early in '68, my mother, Sam, and Kuyu organized BULK, the Black Unity League of Kentucky, to get Black history taught in the public schools and on the college campuses throughout Kentucky. When the civil disturbance broke out on May 27, 1968 in the Parkland neighborhood, the powers that be looked for scapegoats to blame it on. My mother was just 45 years old, and she was charged with conspiracy to not just destroy the buildings that were vandalized and burned at 28th and Greenwood, but also plotting to blow up the oil refineries across and down the street from the family homes she shared with her husband and 4 children. I'm so glad to see Dr. Bob Douglas here today, as he was a dear friend of my mother and encouraged her to keep a journal after she, surprisingly enough, found herself indicted later in September of that year. So I know how much what is happening here today would have meant to her. This history is finally being told and will not be forgotten or swept under the rug again. In closing, after the 6 defendants were acquitted in 1970 of July, a TV reporter asked her what she thought about the whole thing. She told them that it never should have happened and that she had hoped that this was the last time anything like this happened in Louisville. 2 years later, in July of 1972, she filed a $1 million damage suit in federal district court against all those whose names appeared in the indictment of conspiracy to deprive her of her rights and malicious prosecution. She sued Mayor Kenneth Smead, Police Chief C.J. Hyde, Commonwealth Attorney Edwin Sharon, and the 4 police officers who also perjured themselves in helping to bring the indictment. The case didn't finally get before the court until 1973 with the help of her attorney, Bill Allison. And although not successful in her appeal on the federal court decision, the case, she said, will make them think twice before they try this on others. In her journal, she wrote the comments she spoke at her press conference when she announced her lawsuit and stated, "I feel this suit is important because the whole train of thought which led to the conspiracy trial was conceived in an atmosphere of hysteria and scapegoating with total contempt for the basic legal rights of those who were eventually tried. Even though there was an acquittal, it alone is not enough. I filed this damage suit because there must be a strong response from the aggrieved to assure that the basic constitutional rights of the citizens of this Commonwealth, and especially those of Black people, will never again be violated in such a marker. This marker will hopefully encourage the community to learn the lessons only the past can teach, and to remind us of the importance of showing up, speaking up, and fighting against injustice anywhere so that our basic constitutional rights will never again be violated. Thank you again, Mayor Fisher, for helping to call attention to this injustice the Black Six suffered and for helping to keep this history alive. Thank you.
Now, next, we're going to hear from Walter Cosby, son of Walter Pete Cosby.
You gotta excuse me, but I'm a godly and biblical man, so to God be the glory for what is being done here. It's hard sometimes for this 63-year-old man to go back and rehearse the wounds of that 10-year-old boy. So we won't do that today. To Joy McAtee, to, oh God, Gabita Morgan, and to Rachel Plack, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And to this mayor here, who has allowed the Spirit of God to rest upon his shoulder, to be who I will now call the Good Samaritan, not Mayor Fisher. You're a Good Samaritan to me, because when the Good Samaritan seen a guy laying on the ground that had been wounded and beat up and bruised and taken advantage of, he didn't just step over. That were not to speak ill of the other mayors that have stepped over, but a lot of them just stepped over. This particular mayor had the audacity to reach down and help and take them to the end. He took the Black Six to the end. That's what the Good Samaritan did. And by leaving them, I know he had a city to run, but he left them at the end, and he told the innkeeper to make them well, make them whole. And if there's anything else that needs to be done, charge it to my account. So, man, as you leave your office, you can't leave this job undone. You've got us to the innkeeper, and we are so grateful of that. But check back on us and make sure that we've been made whole and been made well. May God bless you and keep you. I speak on my father's behalf. He never said a word ill about the Black Six experience. I'm not mad at the city. I'm not mad at the administration. He never brought it up. But I praise God for this opportunity that you have brought truth to light. God bless you.
Please welcome former Jefferson County Commissioner and political activist Dolores Delahanty, whose husband was Robert Kuyu Sims' attorney, Robert Delahanty. So we hand you up here. Okay, sorry, buddy. Okay, the Delahanty family is in the house.
Well, it is my pleasure to be here and speak on behalf of the Delahanty family. My mom, Dolores, is here. My sister, my daughter, etc. Tim, I won't forget you either. You know, it was quite an experience growing up during this time frame. My dad, God rest in peace, was one of the attorneys for the Black Six, and I will have to say this, you know, I have a legal background also, and I was so amazed at the group of attorneys that stood up and represented these fine gentlemen and Sherry's mom. It was truly a legal dream team. Ben Show, Neville Tucker, Dan Taylor, Bill Allison, who is here and will speak to you about his experiences, and then Bob. You know, during that time frame, the boys' family was too young to really be involved in the situation, but we learned through my dad, you know, the tragedy that occurred and what this team of legal experts did for these gentlemen. And the Commonwealth was overwhelmed. They just didn't know that such a team could be put together for these fine people. And at every turn, except one now. I mean, when there was a motion granted to move the case to Hart County, which truly would have been terrible, they fought and they used the newspaper, they used legal tactics to move the case back to Jefferson County. And they knew, Bill knew, the best way to win a criminal case is to keep it from getting to a jury. And they did everything in their power to do so, and they presented such a fine case to David's late father that Judge Nicholson dismissed the case before he got to a jury, finding that there was absolutely no proof that Ruth or the five gentlemen had anything to do with insurrection, conspiracy, etc. And while we're here to honor the Black Six, we're also here to honor the attorneys that helped them through this terrible experience. And I will say this on behalf of Bob, not only was he their attorney, he was their friend. He was in the courtroom and he was out on the streets with them. And Mom held us together, took care of everything on Bob, and Bob was gone a lot because he put his heart and soul, and it was one of his proudest achievements to have this acquittal. And I want to thank Sam, who's been a family friend forever. We're at his birthdays, he's at our gatherings, he's such a fine, fine man. Manfred, for what was done to you and your business and your life, thank God that you're strong enough to be here and still fighting the fight. But it was terrible what they did to the business history of the Black community. And I'm just so proud. Thank you.
We're going to continue now on the legal team a little bit here. Sam, we're going to come back to you to kind of wrap it together here. We got a birthday boy in the house. 80 years old today, Bill Allison. Who knew about that? And please welcome the former ACLU, Kentucky, and defense attorney, Bill Allison.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I was a mere just out of law school when I came to work for the Southern Conference Educational Fund, which was Ann and Carl Braden's organization. And they were a Southwide civil rights group and were very instrumental in raising awareness about the racial injustice of the arrest of the Black Six, and had fought for open housing, and they asked me to come on in and be one of the lawyers to assist Dan Taylor at the time in representing Cortez. So I was more like I carried the legal papers for these great lawyers, and enjoyed it. It was a tremendous thing to watch, but in the eye of the hurricane, you don't understand that. It was, I think that folks don't understand unless it hits you what happens when you are indicted and arrested for crimes that you never committed, and it goes on for several years. In this case, bounced around to Hart County and back, and different judges. And the lawyers, I won't mention them again, but they were very outstanding people. A lot of times lawyers get treated, in the media pretty rough, and sometimes they deserve it. But there are lawyers who work for nothing because the issues were so important and so just, so righteous. And that's what happened in this case. And none of them gave up. And so they should be remembered and honored for the work they did. And today is, we need to honor the mayor. We've been through several mayors since the 1960s. But this was the first mayor who made an official apology. And that is very hard for politicians and elected officials to do. very hard. And so he should be honored for that, and I commend him for that. One final thing, and it it was not just the lawyers, and of course the rock star of the whole thing was Judge Nicholson, who talk about difficulty when you are in the legal system for a judge to grant a verdict of acquittal after the state puts on their case. That is unheard of. But this judge had the guts and the wherewithal and the fortitude and the insight to do that. And when we walked out that day, and there's that great picture that caught us at the outside, that was because Judge Nicholson had the guts to do it. More judges need to do that, and say this is not a case here, and they don't, but he did, and he did that all of his judicial career. But one thing should also be remembered, that the apologies are very important, that wrongs happened, but also people who have gone through the scars that get left. It's not over when you walk out and you've been acquitted after a couple of years of struggle. You carry those struggles, those scars with you the rest of your life. There needs to be compensation, financial and other compensation for people who go through unjust legal battles. And that does happen in some cases around our country, and it needs to happen more, and it should happen for the Black Six. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got some families in our community that just have generations of service. And the Nicholson family is one of those families. So now Jefferson County Circuit Court Clerk David Nicholson, son of Judge Rush Nicholson, who acquitted the Black Six because of a lack of evidence, is here to speak on his family's behalf.
Yeah, I certainly want to thank Mayor Fischer and Fraser Museum and University of Louisville to finally say the thank you. To finally understand, it's not a surprise though coming from this administration, from this mayor. Because what did he say on day one is he's exiting here after 12 years? City of compassion. That's something, and I have my brother and sister-in-law here, S. Rush Nicholson Jr., here with us today, is that we were always taught, do what's right in your heart. Have faith. And as I look, the courtroom is actually here to my left. It's a beacon of light. It's an open area right here on Congress Alley. And I know as many are smiling down upon us today, they're proud of somewhat the journey that has been made. But this is just a beginning to make a recognition. Our father loved the law. And that's something that's important, I think, that you have to understand, because there were fine, articulate, intelligent attorneys fighting for these 6 individuals. And his love and understanding of the law, I have many lawyers come to me today that say, your father and I butted heads. I didn't realize it at the time, but he made a lawyer out of me. And I'll simply close by saying that many of you have heard stories or think that it could be a myth, but it's true. There is a tunnel that connected the courthouse to my left to the jail to the right. And as a child, I would come down, during the summers, to Dad's court. And I'd be taken over to the jail via the tunnel and eat breakfast. One particular day, a little commotion there. Right outside my office, as I was former chairman of the Crime Commission, But at the time, that's where they brought everybody into the jail. And the deputies got sidetracked. I'm sitting there, and people were saying, man, they're bringing them in awful young, you know, they're awful young. And, you know, I didn't befriend, but anyway, I'm shaking hands through the cell. Get on the elevator, you didn't shake hands? I said, yeah. I said, oh my God, that's the Black Six Try, that's Cortez. Well, of course, I told my dad that night. He said, did he extend his hand? I said, absolutely. He said, did you shake his hand? I said, absolutely. He said, you did the right thing, son. And to this day, I always try to help individuals. So on behalf of the Nicholsons, we are honored to be here, but understand when you do the right thing, it's a shame it took 50 years to come back and say to those defendants, we apologize, but we're gonna honor you with the marker. So I'm excited to get outside and see the unveiling of the marker. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
I want to recognize former Alderman and Councilman Tom Owen, one of our great historians here in the city, for being with us. Thank you. I want to thank the Deputy Mayor, Ellen Hessen, too. Ellen was pushing behind all this to make sure we got this done here as we're wrapping up our administration. So, Ellen, I see you typically low-key fashion. Thank you. And I want to recognize Senator Gerald Neal over here as well. Senator, would you like to explain something? He served our community for a long time.
You know, actually, it's all been said here, but I couldn't sit in that chair and think that this wasn't a powerful exhibition of acknowledgement and a powerful opportunity for reconciliation. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful moment. And I looked up here and I know all these people, all of our friends. And we've had things happen on various levels with respect to them. I can't tell you nothing, but I'm really feeling good today. And I'm gonna thank this mayor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This mayor had the helm at a very tough time. Don't have to go into details on that. But I got to say, and I'm a critic, I can be as
Okay. Okay. So that was just a little bit of the dedication ceremony. I thought I had Sam, his speech, and I really do. If I have it, I really want you to see, because Sam Hawkins did speak. And give me 1 second. Okay, I don't have it where I need to have it. I'll show you that another day. I'll have Sam back on and we'll talk about the Black Six again and what this meant to him. So, but just wanted to share that with you. You know, there are a lot of times things that happen in the city. There are a lot of things that happen on a daily basis, and you cannot go to everything. And I pick and choose the things that I do go to, because I was on 28th and Greenwood the day that they say the riot was not a riot broke out. It left an impression on my life. It left an impression on my neighborhood, and it left a scar on our community. That after 50 years, there's a period of reinvestment into the West. And coming up on Martin Luther King Day, I think that's something that we can acknowledge finally. You know, better late than never, but finally, after 50 years, there's been a reinvestment into West Louisville, to put it back on the map, because during the 60s, when most of the blacks moved to the West. Um, that was a flourishing middle class neighborhood. That whole community was our childhood in the 60s is nothing like people's childhoods now. I don't remember having a bad childhood, and I think most of my friends had decent childhoods as well. So we're really glad that the city and all the different organizations and the philanthropists, private sector, nonprofit sector, the Louisville Urban League. Shout out to Sadiqa that she put Louisville on the map with the Sports and Learning Center, Norton Sports and Learning Center, who's going to have a track meet, a classic track meet on Monday. I plan to attend because I love track and field events. I ran track for Shawnee. So on that note, it's Friday. I know everybody's out and about, but just hopefully that gave you a little insight into what happened. And there is a marker. It's on the 6th Street side of City Hall. Okay, when you come down 6th Street, you know where you used to go get your driver's license. Well, there's the yard around the building. There's a marker for the Black Six. Across the street, they also placed in Justice Square. They placed a marker for Breonna Taylor. So if you get a chance to visit these markers and just take a look and read the history about the event that happened that caused the markers to be. And on that note, I'm going to say it's dinner time. Bon appetit. Enjoy yourself, but don't forget, don't forget. Put it on your calendar. Tony Morgan, girls' night out, girls doing it. Tony Morgan, Las Vegas. Here on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner on Monday, June 16th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So on the West Coast, that'll be at 4 o'clock. So I know a lot of folks might be working, but some of us retirees can tune in. But you'll always be able to find shows on Facebook, Jantastic Productions page, YouTube page, Jantastic Productions, Roku, Jantastic Productions. And I also share the link on my Jantastic Productions LinkedIn page. So on that note, I am wishing everyone a Jantastic weekend because we are going to go out with that. We're going to come on with that because I want your life to be as Jantastic as mine is. God's blessings to you. Have a safe weekend. Ciao. Okay, there we go. Come on.